Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk today about Purim a bit. We have we'll get to the Torah portion that we read yesterday. Next week, hopefully, a bit beginning of the book of Leviticus. But this week we have Purim. Wednesday night and Thursday are Purim. It's a holiday. It's a rabbinically ordained holiday, but it's a holiday that it's ordained by the rabbis in a way that it actually gives it biblical backing. Both Hanukkah and Purim, although they're not biblical, and they clearly they spring from events that happened long after we got the Torah. We still, when we make blessings, whether on the Hanukkah lights or on the reading of the Megillah, make a blessing that it says, "Thank you, God, for giving us the commandment of lighting Hanukkah lights." Where did God give us a commandment like that? That's not in the Torah. Or where did thank you, God, for giving us the mitzvah of reading the Megillah, which is the scroll of Esther, and that obviously was not given to us by God. As we normally speak about the Torah, God giving us the mitzvahs at Mount Sinai, that wasn't part of Mount Sinai. It happened 1,000 years later, give or take. So the idea is that the Torah itself tells us that when the Sanhedrin, the central rabbinic authority, which no longer exists, hasn't existed for 1,000 years or more than 1,000 years, when they institute something, so the Torah tells us, Moses tells the Jews, do not swerve from it to the right or to the left. In other words, when we get instructions from the central rabbinic authority, the Torah says we have to listen. So by extension, it is a biblical commandment. There is no biblical commandment to keep Purim. There's a biblical commandment to listen to the rabbis who told me to keep Purim. So we can go that so far as says, make a blessing and say, thank you, God, for giving me the mitzvah of reading the Megillah, when we know that there was no such mitzvah per se, except that it came through the rabbi. So while some people look at Hanukkah and Purim because they're rabbinic as, being, I guess, a lower tier holiday than the biblical ones, and Pesach that's coming up, and that's true that there's one we got directly from God and one we got through the rabbis. At the same time, it is considered it's certainly a holiday we take very seriously, take the mitzvah seriously, and it's we have a responsibility to it, like we have a responsibility to keep Pesach, because ultimately all traces back to the same Torah. So in the story of Purim, the basic story of it is like many of the stories. They wanted to kill us. Somebody wanted to kill us, and God saved us. We persevered. And in this specific case, it was the leaders of the Persian Empire. The Persians had overtaken the Babylonian Empire. The Babylonians had conquered Israel. If you want to give it zoom out a little bit of context, they really were the dominant civilization. They conquered Israel. They destroyed the temple. They destroyed Israel. They took many captives to Babylonia with them, including Daniel, wrote the book of Daniel. That all went on in Babylonia. The Jews actually prospered a lot in Babylonia, which has been, thank God, the case in many throughout history, that even though Jews ended up in different lands under adverse conditions and against their will, ultimately they adapted and they flourished. And the Jews did flourish in the Babylonian Empire. When the Persians conquered the Babylonians and they took that over, so now it became the Persian Empire, but land-wise, it's pretty much the same. The Jews flourished under the Persians, and there were Jews. They were wealthy. Many of the Jews were wealthy. They were integrated into society. There were Jews in government. There's a lot of parallels to today, and they were even invited when the king made a grand national feast to celebrate the prior destruction of the temple, which had happened 70 years before. He invited the Jews, and he had kosher food for them. So it's kind of weird ways we integrate into society, whether it's all proper or not. So as the events, I think we all know the events. We don't have to go too deeply into it. The Ahasuerus, who was the king at the time, Xerxes, he ends up with a Jewish queen, Esther. He does not know that she's Jewish. He has an advisor who is an anti-Semite, an avowed anti-Semite named Haman, in anglicized form, who wants to kill the Jews. Haman doesn't know that Esther is Jewish, and he plots to kill the Jews. Ahasuerus, the king, goes along with it. Ultimately, Esther and her uncle or cousin Mordechai, who was a leading rabbi and also a figure in the Persian government at the time, they are able to avert this decree, and we have the miracle of Purim. Now, that's the idea that Jews were saved from a decree, and it's a beautiful idea, and it's a celebration. And actually, there are less known in Jewish history. There are different stories that have gone on over the past few thousand years. We'll say it's Purim of Weisbad, whatever. Different. They would attach this name because they had their own mini stories where we went through problems with Jews were subject to anti-Semitism and we had no rights for so many years. And the recognition of there was no blockbuster miracle splitting of the sea like we have in our biblical stories. It was, you could totally chalk up the events of Purim to having the right people, right place, right time, and mazel. But we see in it a miracle, and we always try to see God's hand. And as I say, the Purim story, what I'm trying to say is the Purim story is not outstanding as or unique in our history. We've had struggles, we've had persecutions, we've had decrees, and Baruch Hashem, many times we were able to see that we make it out without some supernatural miracle. In the Talmud, there's some comments on. There's a tractate on Purim called Megillah, and it's because it's early on that even the book of Esther is part of our scripture. So the other Purims through history were post-scriptural. So you could say, well, this is more prominent because it happened more at the tail end of scriptural time. So that's why it gets top billing, because there's no scroll. There were no more scrolls added or no more books added to the scripture. So we couldn't memorialize the other ones in different ways. But there's something very special, obviously something very special about Purim, beyond the fact that there's the normal human events that we've experienced many times. And one of the things that Talmud tells us is that it, in a way, it caps off. It is like part 2 of the Sinai experience. So let's look at that for a second. I'm going to share screen. In the book of Esther, once in number 1, once everything settles down and everybody's celebrating and Esther's celebrating and they're establishing this holiday, it says the Jews committed themselves and accepted upon themselves to observe these 2 days in the manner prescribed at the proper time each year, which means, okay, so they committed themselves to a holiday. Makes sense. But there's actually, the rabbis say that there's more to this. In the Purim events, we had someone, and the conventional way of looking at it, there's this Hitler who wants to kill everyone, and the Jews have no way out. And with their mazel, they have a Jewish queen. Who would think, that a queen of the Persian Empire, of the dominant empire of the time, would be Jewish, and they're able to be rescued. From one angle of reading the story, the Jews, this isn't exactly Hitler, because with Hitler, I mean, I hate to compare one anti-Semite to another anti-Semite, but they're all whatever. But with Hitler, if someone was Jewish, doesn't make a difference. It didn't make a difference to him if they said, I'm converting to Christianity, or doesn't make a difference. If you had Jewish blood, it wasn't about your observance, and he wanted us all dead. Haman, we're told, was really against those who, the Jewish nation, those who affiliated, those who identified as Jews. So there was an out. People could have said, okay, I'm not going to identify as a Jew. I'm giving up my ID card. And if you think about it, it could have worked. And people would say, listen, we're doing well here. We want to. What happened during the Inquisition? Many people said, I will profess being a Christian externally, and then in my house, even though at the pain, if I'm discovered, I'll be at the pain of death. I'm going to light Shabbos candles in the closet. I'm going to have a Seder in my basement. I want to be able to keep Judaism alive. So they're telling themselves conceivably, yeah, I'm giving in to the enemy. I am distancing myself on the outside and calling myself a Christian. But meanwhile, I'm keeping myself and my family loyal to Judaism, and I'm surviving. So you'd think that in times of Purim, there'll at least be a segment, a demographic that'll say, okay, we'll give it up. And then they do in their homes what they'll do in their homes, just, draw the blinds. What we're told is that the Jews at that time refused to even have the appearance of distancing themselves from Judaism, from Jews, from Torah, from God. And they stuck, they clung to their faith openly, that we are Jews and we're not going to give it up, which was something very special. They showed a love for God and for being Jewish. So in that light, someone just asked me something. When Moses came down with the second edition, the tablets were broken, were the only 10 commandments on it. With the exact same commandments. The wording is actually a little bit different than some of them, but it's the exact same commandments, just the second tablets. Okay. So now let's go to, I want to do a share screen. So here the Talmud tells us in note 2, at Mount Sinai, God held the mountain above the Jews like a tub. Okay, so this is a metaphor. Okay, so but here the imagery is the Jews are gathered at the mountain, and God picks the mountain up, holds it over their heads, and says, "Here, you want the Torah? If you accept the Torah, excellent. If not, your burial will be here." So what does that mean? What the Talmud is saying is that the Jews were overwhelmed at Sinai. These are slaves. They had been slaves for hundreds of years. They're all born as slaves. Their parents are all born as slaves. These are not people who have any sense of volition and autonomy in their lives. It's 7 weeks after they've made it out. They come to Sinai, and they're told, now God, the Infinite One, is going to speak to you, and you're going to be a people, and you're going to have your own constitution, the Torah, and God speaks to them. Did they have any choice? I mean, they're overwhelmed. It's not like said, oh, yes, we're thinking this through. Hang on, we'll get back to you. Of course, they said, whatever you say, boss. First of all, we just saw you for a year. You whacked the Egyptians with these incredible miracles. Okay, well, whatever you say is what we're going to do. So what the Talmud is saying with this imagery of God held the mountain over their heads was they were overwhelmed. There was not a free will acceptance of the Torah. By what we call free will. I'm going to speak to someone. Mendy Herson is going to go have coffee with someone. We start talking about it, and we say, "I think this is a good idea." And they think, maybe yeah, maybe no. Rabbi, I'll get back to you. I'll think about it. Speak to my friends. Whatever. That's what we call free volition. There wasn't what we could honestly call free volition at Sinai. So now to go back to the quote. So it said, this presents a substantial caveat to our obligation to fulfill the Torah. So the Talmud itself is saying, there's something hanging here. To the Jews going through history after Sinai, when a child could say to a parent, why do we do this? Just because grandma did it? Why? And they say, oh, because there was a Sinai experience and we accepted the Torah. The child, if the child knows enough about Jewish history, will say, accepted the Torah, or we were bullied into it. This is a caveat, means there's something, there's an asterisk around our acceptance of the Torah because we didn't accept it with free will. We were overwhelmed with all of the godliness of spiritual fireworks, wherever our place in life at the time. And Jews can claim they were coerced into accepting the Torah and is therefore not binding. So the Talmud there concludes that still in all, even so they again accepted it willingly in the time of Purim. The Jews at the Purim, when they did not have these any supernatural miracles, and they were living well, and they had choices, and they felt a lot of autonomy in their lives. They said to themselves, no, we don't want a life without being the Jewish people, without being Jewish, without God, without Torah. We are going to actually jeopardize all we have here in order to stay connected to our Judaism. Accepted willingly in time of Torah, as is written, the Jews committed and accepted by themselves. The Jews committed themselves to what they had previously accepted through coercion at Sinai. So the idea is that Purim is, in the scope of our history, is huge. It's not it is another case where God intervened through the guise of nature and saved our people. Yes, absolutely, and we say thank you, God. Like I said, we've had a lot of those episodes. This is in the scope of our history. This is huge because it was seen as a time where the collective Jewish people, because just about everyone was living in the Persian Empire at the time. Actually, everyone was living within the environs, what we would call the Persian Empire. And they're Jews with unanimity. They said, we willingly want to and even at the expense of our lives, we want to be part of the Jewish people. That was the general free will acceptance that was missing since Sinai. That capped off Sinai, which is, it's not just about the Persian Empire. It's about us as Jews in history. That here, that idea that God gave us a Torah and we as a people accepted it, that it now stands there. If a child asks a parent in these days, say, well, the Torah, we were bullied into it. So no, we got it then. You're right, we were overwhelmed. But in Purim, that time, our ancestors accepted this in free will for us. If that's the case, and Purim is indeed has this very central place in our history, in our Torah history. So the Rebbe asked, so why don't we have anything in Purim that recognizes that? Some memory, if there's the Jews came out of Egypt, and we want to recognize that, so we have matzah. Reminds us of what they ate on the way out of Egypt. The Jews were in the desert being protected by clouds of glory. We want to remember that. We put up sukkahs with the schach, the temporary roof, represents the clouds of glory. You want to have some symbolism to it. There's no symbolism of Sinai in Purim. Purim has 4 mitzvahs. We read the Megillah, read the story. We have a good meal, which we have every, except for Yom Kippur, every holiday, we want to have a meal. We give charity to the poor, which is a mitzvah all year round. And we increase friendship, which is a mitzvah all year round, by giving food packages, mishloach manot, shalach mons. There's nothing, first of all, and as we're going to talk about, there's nothing even that uniquely Purim about this necessarily, that on the face of it, because a Torah reading, meal, friendship, giving to the poor, that happens regularly. We have a Torah reading every Shabbos, we have a Torah reading every holiday. We have a meal every Shabbos, every holiday. We're always, every day there's a mitzvah to increase friendship. Every day there's a mitzvah to give tzedakah. So let alone that there's nothing there. There certainly doesn't seem to be anything there that recognizes its connection with the Sinai experience and capping off the Sinai experience. So what the Rebbe suggested is that we actually do see something special in the Purim observances that bring to mind this idea of the free will acceptance of Torah. Why? Because on the one hand, as I said, the mitzvahs are not outstanding. There's no matzah. There's no Hanukkah lights. Special lights in a certain sequence, and there's no blowing a shofar. There's no sukkah. It's as the scroll of Esther tells us, they're be observed as days of feasting and joy, an occasion for sending gifts to one another, which would be a nice thing to do on a regular Tuesday too, because it's strengthening friendships, and presents to the poor. And Deuteronomy has told us, as a general mitzvah, open your hand to the poor and needy kin in your land. It's always a mitzvah to give tzedakah. Leviticus tells us you love your fellow as yourself, right? That means to care about each other. Sending a gift is to be able to increase that sense of connectedness. In the Code of Jewish Law, I took from the abridged one because it's just clearer language for what we need here. It tells us that every person, in number 6, every person is obligated to send a food gift on. This is Purim. That even though these are mitzvahs all year round, on Purim, as I think we know because I just mentioned it, every person is obligated to send a food gift consisting of 2 components to at least one person. And every person, even a pauper, is obligated to give a gift to at least 2 paupers. So let's just think about those mitzvahs first for a second. On Purim, what we say is that what's on a Tuesday? What happens on a Tuesday? If a poor person comes to my door, or I'm walking down the street and a poor person asks me for money, if I can do it, I give the money. That's the mitzvah. But if it's a Tuesday and I'm in the office and I've got things to do I have to go look for a pauper? I don't have to go look for a pauper. If a friend reaches out today that they need help, they're feeling down, and I go over, give them the gifts of my time, I bring over some chicken soup, that's beautiful. Do I have to go and think of who's a friend today who can need chicken soup? I got other mitzvahs to do. It's nice, it's beautiful, but it's not a mitzvah that I have to do it today. Purim, we don't wait for the need. Purim, we are proactive. And we don't just give tzedakah to one person, we look for 2 people. And you can do it online, by the way. And people, I'm sure enough of them will say, we will make sure this money, the $5 you give, whatever it is will go to a poor person on the day of Purim. And we look for that, and we look 2. We don't even, not even 1. And then we also look for an opportunity to send a friend, not just a banana, but a banana and an apple, or chicken soup and a kugel, whatever it is, because we are doing something. What's the difference between doing something because we have to, because God told us we have to, because we came out of Egypt, we don't know what hit us. 7 weeks later, God gives us the stuff. We say, okay. This is something that it was put in our lap. And if we believe in it, we have to do it. We discharge our obligations. There's a difference between discharging our obligations and enthusiastically pursuing opportunities because they're special. And that's the difference between a willing acceptance and joyous acceptance in taking the Torah into our lives and accepting it. So in accepting it, what we had before Purim is we do it. We can discharge it. Purim, we want to show ourselves, the community, God, that this is something we are enthusiastic about. That we're not going to wait for the need. We're going to look for the need. We're not going to just discharge it with the bare minimum to be able to check it off the list. One person, no, I'm going to give it to 2 people charity. I'm not just going to bring them a chicken soup. I'm going to bring chicken soup and a kugel. Because I'm trying to, I want to show we are articulating that this is meaningful to us. We willingly accept it upon us. We see this as a treasure. If that's the case, Now, those are those two. What about the scripture, right? We read the Torah at every holiday about the holiday. And the Megillah is seemingly the same. But if you take a look here at number 7, Queen Esther pushed to be able to have a scroll of Esther. She sent a message to the sages, and she says, establish me, my Purim observance, as a fixed part of Judaism for future generations. I don't want just to be a memory. I want this to be a consistent part of people's lives. They responded, not so fast. If we write this up, we'll thereby arouse the wrath of the nations upon us. You're the anti-Semites are gonna look. We're poking our finger in their eye. We're gloating as the Megillah recounts the victory of the Jews over the Gentiles. It's best not to publicize that victory. Don't go. That's okay. Take our victory quietly. We're gonna have class. We're not gonna push it in their faces. She sent back to them, grow up. It's already written in the Chronicles of the Kings of Persia. Megillah will not publicize it. Anything that's not already known worldwide. Oh, 1 second. Did I bring it up? I guess I didn't bring it up. I apologize. I think I just did it wrong. Oops. Now, number 7. I don't have to read it again. You can read it yourselves. But the Megillah will not publicize anything that's not already known worldwide. Queen Esther pushed for this. It was beyond the norm. And the rabbi said, we don't have to. And she said, I know you don't have to. I want you to. And there are a few other, didn't go to put all the repartee between her and the rabbis. She pushed her way that she wants this done. Now, the idea of recognizing a holiday is beautiful. And even the idea that we should have a blurb, this is what went on. You could tell the story of Purim in a paragraph. We have 10 chapters with a lot of detail. You don't have to have that. And as a great rabbi of the 17 and 1800s wrote, Moshe Sofer, he says, biblically, we may establish a festival on the day when we experience the miracle, which means that the idea of celebrating on Purim has biblical standing. But the details, whether it's saying gifts to friends, and he gets into Purim, or charity to the poor, they're rabbinic. One might say that the instruction to praise God through the Megillah on Purim also fulfills a biblical commandment to recognize the miracle. He says the idea that we recognize God for every morning, we have vision, we have hearing, we recognize God. The idea that we recognize God, that when there was such a story like Purim, absolutely. Do you have to get into the details? You don't have to get into the details. What does that tell us? In a way, that's the same thing like taking charity, which is all year round, and doing it amplified, doing it with enthusiasm. We're going to not wait, but proactively find 2 people. Just like the mitzvah of fostering fraternity between people. We're not going to wait for an opportunity or, someone's feeling a little blue today. We're going to look and we're going to say, I want to reach out for you. And not with 1 thing, but with 2 things. Here with remembering the miracle, it wasn't just, we're going to remember it. Gratitude to God. It's a whole Megillah. There's all the details there. We fleshed it out. And Queen Esther, she's butting heads with the rabbis. This was important. It was important to give this, not to put flesh on the bones, not a skeleton. Okay, this is what God said. We got to do it, and we it's a task list, and we get it done. No, it's a beautiful expression of our connection with God. When you have a loved one and you're doing something for them, you don't want to do it just a bare basic. You want to do it that shows that you care. And in this case, Purim shows we care. Purim reflects the way we do it. It reflects this idea of we like the Torah. We willingly accept it. This isn't just something that we were saddled with. We're so happy to have this Torah. Now, this itself, we could have finished it over here. I think it's an insight in and of itself. But to take it a little further, let's dig a little deeper into the mitzvahs of Purim to take the theme a little deeper. There is a not small body of opinion who feels that the mitzvahs of giving food packages to each other and charity to the poor are actually all part of the festive meal. Take a look at this in number 9. In both of these mitzvahs, Mishloach Manot and Tzedakah to the poor, the aim is to make sure they have food for the festive meal. So, from this perspective, everything I just said is totally off the table. There's one basic mitzvah to Purim. Have a great meal. There's the read and have a great meal. Make yourself happy. Because whenever there's a spiritual happiness, we want to make the body happy. How do we know? I'm sitting and having my meal, and I want to make sure, as part of my joy, I want to make sure others can also be joyous. So I send some food to my neighbor, because they may not have enough for a Purim meal. I give some food to poor people. Why? Because they may not have enough for a Purim meal. It's all centered on the Purim meal. There is that perspective. Bring it up for a reason. We'll get back to this. Now look at Maimonides. Maimonides says like this in the laws of Purim. He says a person should be more liberal with alms to the poor than with preparations for the Purim feast or in sending portions to friends. Okay, so it's interesting. He doesn't frame it as an outgrowth of the Purim feast. He says, actually, if you're going to spend money, it's better to spend more money on helping the poor than on your own Purim feast. Have a Purim feast; it's a mitzvah. Or even on the money the money you're spending and giving food to friends, Mashloach Manot. Why? For there is no greater and more splendid happiness than to gladden the hearts of the poor, the orphans, the widows, and the converts. Orphans, widows, and converts are all seen as being, at least potentially, and very often in a more vulnerable place. So the poor, the orphans, the widows, and converts, as the idea is, those might be people who need a little bit more effort of inclusion and support. One who brings happiness to the hearts of these vulnerable individuals resembles the divine presence. He goes over the top here. He says, we're being godlike. When we help, we bring happiness. Not just help, we bring happiness to vulnerable individuals, which Isaiah describes as having the tendency to revive the spirit of the lowly, to revive those with broken hearts. So this is something, obviously, this is a very, very special within the Purim spectrum. There's something special about giving alms to the poor. Now, there are a few questions with this. First of all, Maimonides had previously, and we're going to read it soon, he spoke about the mitzvahs of the meal and giving gifts, and he separates this. So he's not framing it as meal centered and then the other for support. And not only that, of all the mitzvahs, he's saying there's something very special about charity. Now, why is charity different on Purim than today? It's always a mitzvah. And as a matter of fact, if Maimonides has a comprehensive, one of the beauties is he has a comprehensive book of Jewish law. He addresses all areas of Jewish law, including the laws of charity. This is laws of Purim. Say you have to give charity to two people. This Megillah here he puts in about all the beauty of charity. That doesn't belong here. It belongs to the laws of charity. And actually, if you look at 11, in laws of gifts to the poor, which is not about Purim, it's just for today, it says we're obligated to the mitzvah tzedakah to a greater extent than all other positive commandments because tzedakah is an identifying mark for a righteous person at the descendant of Abraham. It says Jews specifically, all of humankind is responsible to give tzedakah, but for Jews, it's really a family obligation. The throne of Israel will not be established. In other words, that Jews will not be able to have their self-determination only through tzedakah, and Israel will be redeemed solely through tzedakah. A person will never become impoverished from giving charity. That's what the Talmud promises us, that what we give to charity will come back. So here, that's where this belongs. In the laws of giving tzedakah, give to the poor. That's where Maimonides should flesh it out. And also, he does add there in number 12 that it is forbidden to scold a poor person, not to even raise one's voice against him. And the verse tells us to revive the spirit of the lowly and to revive those with broken hearts, which is the verse that he quotes here in Purim. He quotes it here too. The thing is, in Purim, he says that by giving tzedakah, you're like God. In the laws of tzedakah, he doesn't say that. So you have a couple of questions here, just a study of Maimonides. It makes sense for Maimonides to flesh out the beauty of giving tzedakah in the section on tzedakah. In Purim, what he would say is it's a mitzvah to give tzedakah to two people on Purim, and if he wants, he can add. And for the beauty of what that is, see my laws of tzedakah. Why does he go into it as in the laws of Purim when really it's just it's a book of laws? You're saying you have to give tzedakah to two people, and then he goes even beyond it. He quotes the same verse. But in the laws of Purim, he says that by giving tzedakah, we are mirroring God. And in the other one, he doesn't. So, to look at this, let's take a look at go back to we said about the feast. And there's some opinions, everything centers on the feast. Why? Because it's a happy day, and it's ultimately when you eat and drink and everything, that's what makes you happy. What did Maimonides write? He said, what is the nature of obligation for this feast? He said, a person should eat meat and prepare as attractive a feast as his means permit. He should drink wine until he becomes intoxicated and falls asleep in a stupor. Nobody get off the Zoom yet. They want to talk about this. But Maimonides does say, as a quote from the Talmud, that the words say you're supposed to get drunk on Purim. Similarly, a person is obligated to send two foods to a friend. If one does not have the means to send presents of food to a friend, one should exchange one's meal with him, each one sending the other what they prepared for the Purim feast. In this way, they fulfill the mitzvah of sending presents of foods to one's friend. He says, I live here, you live next door. We don't have a lot of money. I prepared a Purim feast, you prepared a Purim feast. I don't got anything else to send you. You don't have anything else to send me. I'll give you mine, I'll take yours. You send me yours. That way we shared. If part of it is about, right, we're trying about the fraternity between people and according to some, and providing for their meals. Now, that, I'm going to get into the drunkenness in a second, but just about the meal itself. In number 14, the laws of holidays, this is not the laws of Purim, the laws of holidays, the laws, let's say for Pesach. When one eats and drinks in celebration of a holiday, which we're supposed to every holiday, one is obligated to feed converts, orphans, widows, and others who are destitute and poor. A Torah value is that if I'm happy, my happiness should include others being happy. And therefore, I should want to be able, if someone needs a table to eat at, I should keep the door open for them. So, and he says that one who locks the gates of one's courtyard and eats and drinks without feeding the poor and the embittered is not indulging in rejoicing associated with mitzvah, but rather the rejoicing of the gut. Okay. So Maimonides looks at the laws of the rejoicing on the Yom Tov as our meal needs to be a meal where there is room. If someone needs, that we have space for them, that we're open to them. He doesn't say that, and on a Passover, our Sukkot, our Shavuos, that we have to go out and give food to someone else. But our meal, in order for us to discharge our obligation of having a festive meal, it should be in a way where we're not locking the doors. We're letting other people come if they want to. We don't have to invite them. We don't have to grab them off the streets. We don't have to do anything proactive, but we're open. So there's a distinction here, and that's what we want to get into, between, again, we said Purim, we're proactive. We're reaching out to them. Say, I want to help you have a meal in your house. You can come to my house too. Yom Tov, on holidays, it's not about me reaching out. It's that I have an obligation to have a festive meal. And for me to have a moral festive meal, I should have an open house. If somebody needs, they'll come. If they don't need, they're welcome. If no one's at my meal, on a holiday meal because no one needed it or no one asked, I haven't violated anything. I've kept my Yom Tov obligation. My man is saying if I lock the gates and I don't let people come in, then I there's a deficiency. I'm open in theory, but no one came. Purim, I have to reach out. So this relates to what we're saying here. Let's take a look at text 15, and this is really the heart of primarily what we're coming at here. They have a point. It says that in the scroll of Esther, when the day when Purim is described, Purim is one day, and there's a second day also. It's called Shushan Purim. There's a second day in Jerusalem, in walled cities. There's a second day of Purim. In Jerusalem and Tiberias, there are a few cities in Israel which have a second day of Purim. So in other words, it will not only be Thursday, it'll be Friday too. They are to observe them as days of feasting and joy, as an occasion for sending gifts to one another and presents to the poor. So here's what this way into understanding it presents to us. Pesach is about celebrating the fact that we were liberated from Egypt. How do I celebrate it? I have matzah. I have a seder. I have a joyous meal. But it's a day celebrating liberation, or days. Sukkot is a day celebrating God's care for us in the desert. For that, put up a sukkah. For that, we put up. We have festive meals. Purim are days of joy, because the beauty of what Purim is about is not just that we were saved from an evil decree. That happened many times. The beauty of Purim is that we joyously connected ourselves to God. We joyously embraced our Judaism, even at the expense of Haman's decree. The joy and the enthusiasm in who we are and what we do, that's what the day is. It's different than any other holiday. The joy on other holidays is now, because God took us out of Egypt, we have to celebrate and be joyous. Here, the joy itself is the soul of the holiday. The joy is that we acted joyously, we acted enthusiastically to protect our Judaism, not just because, listen, we're Jews, we got to do it, and it's a mitzvah. I have to have matzah. I have to put up a sukkah. I have to light Shabbos candles. Now I have to do this. It's we voluntarily, of our own volition, we embraced our Judaism, embraced our God, and that, in the words of one of the early Torah authorities, right after the end of the Talmud, he says Purim is even more important than the day on which the Torah was given. Purim is more important, even as the lowest rabbinic, because the day the Torah was given, we just said that earlier when we opened up with it, God gave us the Torah, but it wasn't us taking it. It wasn't us. We took it. We accepted it. It wasn't us grabbing it. It wasn't us enthusiastically reaching out for it. Purim is about the joy of that we want it. And we want to proactively look for an opportunity to have more of it. So, let's get into this idea of what we said before, to take this another twist on this, in the beauty and the joy we have in following Torah and being part of the Jewish people. We said this curious idea, which is, it's a little more than curious, that Maimonides writes, and he's quoting the Talmud, that it's a mitzvah to get drunk on Purim. Now, Maimonides, in his Laws of Yom Tov, says the opposite. He says, when a Torah eats, drinks, and celebrates on a festival, he should not let himself become overly drawn to drinking wine, mirth, and levity. For the drunkenness and profuse levity are not rejoicing, their frivolity and foolishness. So, the idea, to look at the idea of at that piece of Talmud, which I'm going to bring up the Talmud soon, and what Maimonides wrote, as it's a mitzvah to get plastered on Purim, is not a spiritually mature way of looking at it. I can say a reasonable l'chaim, we could do it for those who can, it's something else. But the idea, losing, so he said it, he uses very harsh language. Actually, I want to go back to one more time. His language is drunkenness and profuse levity. They are frivolity and foolishness. He's denigrating it when he himself is writing about it in Purim. The idea of losing it. So here's a way of looking at it at a bit of a higher level, and the various commentaries on the Talmud all through the ages have framed this as not just getting a keg of beer and I mean there's no holiness there. We are celebrating, as I say, celebrating the fact that we got the Torah. Got the Torah. What's the Torah? Torah is a bunch of rules, right? Torah is the rules we're talking about. That's the more external manifestation. It's divine. It's God. It's godliness. And I think once on one of these Zooms we mentioned in the Talmud that the first word of the Ten Commandments, Anochi, meaning I. That's an acronym for I have invested my soul into this. God says I've invested my soul into the Torah. When we study Torah, like now, we're embracing God's essence. When yes, it's this story, yes, it's this mitzvah, they're all very important, but the soul of it that is not immediately apparent is that this is the divine manifestation that the greatest divine manifestation we can have is through Torah. In the language of the Talmud, it said at the giving of the Torah, God said the Torah is a hidden treasure. It's hidden. It's to know what it really is it's too much for human capacity. And as a matter of fact, when God uttered the mitzvahs, the Talmud tells us at Sinai, he had each and every utterance that emerged from God's mouth, Jews' souls flew out from their bodies. What does that mean? Everybody on the Zoom is a human being. Everybody in the Zoom has a capacity, a range of capacity, both intellectual, emotional, and physical, that's within the range of normal humanity, right? All of us, we're all normal humans. We got some of us a little bit more bandwidth on this, less bandwidth on that, whatever. We're all different, but we're all within a certain capacity. How does any of us embrace the divine? We are who we are. We have a vessel, our personality. Our minds can accept so much. Our emotions can accept so much. There's only so much we can handle because we're finite human beings. That's reality. That's the way God created us. So when the infinite is being given to us, it says the souls left the bodies. Because the soul is trapped in my psychospiritual makeup, my profile, and for me to relate to the infinite, it can't be within this finite frame. And the Jews, therefore, says their souls left their bodies, and then it came back, and they got another mitzvah. That's the way the Talmud frames it. So, what is the Talmud saying there? Talmud is saying is that as much as our job is to use our human personalities given to us by God, and our human bodies given to us by God, and limited as God intended and intends, and we're supposed to use it and imbue them with holiness, which is all true. There's nothing to be ashamed of that I'm a limited person. Sometimes, in order to connect with God, I want to try and get a bit past myself. So, for example, the Code of Jewish Law says, when praying, one should envision oneself standing before the divine presence. Pious ones would meditate to a point where they divested themselves of their material perceptions, coming close to the level of prophecy. What would happen in prophecy? What would happen in prophecy is that the prophets and we're going to read this soon. Actually, let's do 22 already. When Maimonides describes what happens in prophecy, when any of them prophesy, their limbs tremble, their physical powers become weak, they lose control of the senses, and thus their minds are free to comprehend what they see. What is Maimonides and it's, well, the Talmud telling us about a prophet? Or what is called the Jewish law saying that we should try to achieve in prayer? To get beyond ourselves. To lose it. 1 second, I think I may have just lose. There was a thing I wanted to bring in here. Yeah, I neglected to put in one. Actually, just for the sake of our conversation here, I neglected to put one of the things in here. So let me just get it quick because I think the words help. Apologize for this little break here. No, I don't have it here either. What I intended to put in. Second. Station identification here. Okay. What I intended to put in. Well, let me just finish this, then I'll tell you what I intended to put in. The code of Jewish law, the prophets, what did the prophets do? The Talmud tells us, Maimonides tells us, that the prophets would lose control of their faculties. It says sometimes they would take off their clothing. They were in a trance and they were getting beyond the limits of their personalities, and just physically they were getting past the normal function, because that's limited. They didn't become infinite, but they were connecting with the infinite. Talmud tells us, the Jewish law tells us that when we pray, we want to get to a place where we're past our material perceptions. But the way we think is very material. It's about our businesses, it's about our bills, it's about our stresses, it's about our food. That's all important. There's nothing wrong with thinking about those things. We have to be responsible human beings. But in prayer, we want to get above the trees. We want to divest ourselves. What I intended to put in here is that the language of the Talmud, which advises, which Maimonides bases his advice, the written advice, to get drunk. Where does it come from? It says, the Talmud says that a rabbi of the Talmud's Rabbi taught that one should be intoxicated on Purim, to the extent that they don't know, Hebrew word is adul yoda, that they don't know the difference between Haman and Mordechai. In other words, their ability for normal distinction and this discernment is gone. Which leads this idea, yeah, they're supposed to get drunk, plastered. Spiritually speaking, say that that idea of not to get to a point of not to know, which means it's that we leave our normal perceptions of knowledge behind, and we're totally open to the divine. And so the idea, I mean, I personally, if you think about it, I don't drink much. Kiddush, Shabbos, Yom Tov, whatever, but I'm not a drinker. I don't like it, and not only don't I like the taste, I don't like the effect. You know, some people ask them, why do you like it? Because they're a buzz. I don't like buzzes. Why don't I like buzzes? Partially because I like to be in control of myself. I don't like that, to have that time off of my own self-control. But in a way, so what, I'm clinging to control. My own control, my own sense of control. There is a beauty to surrendering control. I don't want to do it with alcohol, but the effect of surrendering control of my life to God is not a bad thing at all. And maybe I'm too focused on keeping that control of my life. And maybe that's one of the reasons I don't like to drink. I'm not starting to drink now, but the idea of getting to a place of relaxing our own sense of control, which is often illusory anyway, and giving over to God, that is an idea of get to a point where you don't know the difference. It's give yourself over to God. So in this sense, what the Rebbe was saying, was offering as an interpretation, is that Purim is a time for us to be happy. Purim as a time for us to be just happy being Jews, happy being having a Torah, and we want others to be happy because we want others to share in this. So when I give money to a per person on Purim, it's different than today. If I give money to a per person today, it's about me filling their need. Purim, it's about me helping them be happy by filling their need. It's not the same thing. The accent is different. Purim, I want to be happy. I want them to be happy. And as the Rebbe put it, the ability to focus on an other's happiness, not my own. Yom Tov, I want to be happy. I have a mitzvah to be happy. In order for me to be happy, a mature happiness is that my door is open to people. But it's about my happiness. Purim is very different. Purim, I want to make sure not only I'm happy, that others are happy. Not because it's my mitzvah to be happy, but because I want them to be happy. And that, he said, that is divine. We're all focused on ourselves first. That's normal. And sometimes we take pleasure in helping other people. It says the idea that we can get to a place on Purim where we're giving to the poor because we want them to be happy, not only because it hurts me to see they don't have food, or it's because I like to help someone fulfill their needs. It's I want them to be happy, and to an extent, I also want my friends to be happy. But how much more so when someone is poor and they really need that, and I'm able to give them happiness, the joy we can take in that, so that's divine. And that's why I don't want to bring up the sources again. In the laws of tzedakah, Maimonides doesn't say that giving to the poor it makes us mirror the divine. It's a big mitzvah. It's beautiful. He has a lot of different praises, but it doesn't go that far. Purim, he says that's divine. Why? Because it's a time of leaving ourselves and leaving ourselves to be happy and to really want others to be happy. And that is the heart. I mean, I have one more thing in there, just to complete it, I guess. As the founder of Chabad says, during the Purim events, the Jews spent a year in the psycho-spiritual mode of Mesirat Nefesh, self-sacrifice or self-transcendence. Functionally, they were sacrificing, putting themselves in a difficult place, in a place of jeopardy by continuing to affiliate as Jews. But the term for self-sacrifice, Mesirat Nefesh, it means giving over your soul. What do you mean giving over your soul? That you're giving over your desire. You're getting outside of yourself. Self-transcendence might be a better translation. The Jews, the year of Purim, what Queen Esther observed was the Jews happily and enthusiastically and willingly accepting their Jewish identity, happily and enthusiastically and willingly accepting Torah and their relationship with God. And even though they had so much to lose, and they were doing well, and they had a lot of different reasons to be distracted, and outs that you could rationalize, they surrendered themselves to God. Happily. That's why Queen Esther said, this isn't just another story of salvation from decree. This is a story for the ages. This is the cap to Sinai. That as Jews, we don't just do what we're told. We're not just checking things off a task list. We're happy. And we take effort to get out of ourselves sometimes. Out of ourselves enough that we really care about how another person is thinking. Out of ourselves enough that we're able to connect with the divine, to lose ourselves a little bit in spirituality, and then come back to normal life, but refreshed. So I don't know how well this struck everybody, but I hear there's some comments here. I thought prophets had conditions that modern medicine associates with seizures and schizophrenia. Those predispose them with appropriate training to be receptacles of prophetic visions. I mean, I don't know who says that. That's that would be an interesting speculation. I can't negate it. I don't know that comes from any source that is, in and of itself, all that reliable as a source of Torah thinking, but it's an interesting insight. Okay, meditate. Oh boy, a lot of these. Okay, it's 10 Commandments, so it's not so much with this. Meditation with sense of psychedelics. Oh, is there anything wrong with psychedelics? Something wrong with psychedelics. First of all, because I think because they're illegal. That's number one, and we care about that. Number two, we've had not when I was alive and thinking, but we've had people Jewish leaders, leaders of Jews, who advocated psychedelics. I don't think that's a way for us to go, because psychedelics I guess it's a cheap high. Yeah, there's no moral or internal striving that brings, getting beyond ourselves that gets us to that place. It's popping a pill. It's not only about the end, it's about the means. It takes a lot of the idea of a prophet would be someone who was suitable for prophecy, not only because they can swallow or smoke, it's because they have refined themselves and they've tamed their more selfish urges and opened themselves up to God. Prophecy through popping a pill doesn't seem to be the prophecy we're talking about in the Torah.
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I've been asking it on the chat. I'm confused. You say that the Jews accepted the contract that God and Jews and Moses had developed for them to, accept the Torah. What was exactly on the tablet? Was it all the commandments? The 613 commandments that we would have had to accept could only exist if the temple was there.
10 commandments.
What did the Jews exactly accept in a contract with regards to the Torah? What was on the tablets? What were the 10 commandments? Were there just 10, or were they all kind of brought together in the tablet?
There are 10 commandments on the tablets, both of the tablets. There are those who would point that all 613 commandments can be somehow alluded to in those 10 commandments. What they said to God was, we're taking what you're giving us sight unseen. We're accepting it. And that's what they accepted from themselves.
So it was a sight unseen contract. What about because that's never been expressed by you before. And the other was the oral law. How much of the oral law did Moses, when Moses was reading the commandments, because he was instructed by God, and he says, what, am I weakened like a woman that I have to explain what's in the commandments? How many commandments did Moses tell the Jews, first the women, then the men, vice versa? I don't know. What did he actually tell them at Mount Sinai? When he was reading the commandments, which commandments did he read at Mount Sinai that he was instructed by God to tell them? To read to them, I apologize, read to them.
Okay. So as the Jews came towards Mount Sinai, we're told that Moses taught them a number of mitzvahs, Shabbos, respect for parents, several mitzvahs, and one can assume with some detail. We don't know for sure. When they came to Sinai, there is a very famous expression, which I assume many of you have heard from me before, that the Jews, it is scriptural, and the Jews said it, it's na'asa v'nishma. Na'asa v'nishma means we will do. In other words, we're going to do this, we accept it, and then we'll study, we'll hear, we'll learn later. In other words, we're doing this sight unseen. That is a very, very vibrant quote that people talk about every Shavuos. When we celebrate the Torah, the receiving the Torah, that's what happened. Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do, and then we will hear. Here, we will study, we will understand. So they accepted the sight unseen. When Moses went up the mountain for 40 days, that's when he absorbed most of it. So he's teaching later. But when they accepted it, they didn't have much of it at all.
10, just the 10. That we're sure of.
They did that before the 10.
But the written part, not the oral part, the part that Moses apparently taught the Jews going to Mount Sinai, when he came down with the tablets, you're saying that there's some discussion, which I've read on the Chabad line, that all the 613 may have been alluded to. But the question I have, when he wrote it with his finger or the finger of God, did he write the 613 or did he read the 10 that we're aware of in the movies?
The Torah tells us that God brought the Jews to Mount Sinai, and they prepared, and they said, okay, they said, now, let's follow my chronology. They said, we will accept what you're giving us.
I got that.
Then, hang on. Then God speaks 10 commandments, not Moses. God speaks 10 commandments to them. 10 commandments. Then Moses goes up the mountain, and he comes down with a body of knowledge that he did not have before, that he didn't give before because they didn't have it. And he shares it with them over the time in the desert. But with regard to the Sinai experience, they knew some mitzvahs, even before they got there. They were in a place called Mara. And they didn't, that they heard from Moses. At Sinai, as they're preparing, they say, we're in, now tell us what that means. And they get from God 10 commandments. And they're going to get 603 more as time goes on.
Okay, and the 10 that we're referring to is the 10 that we're aware of. I am your God. There is no God before me. Thou shalt honor thy father, and you know thou shalt not covet. Those are the commandments that were written on those tablets.
Correct. Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, anybody else? Wish you all
Thank
a
you.
wonderful Purim. Anybody say something? Somebody say something?
Oh, just thank you.
Oh, great. That works. Have a wonderful Purim. There are 4 mitzvahs. We'll help you with them if you need it. There's the idea of hearing the Megillah. I think everyone lives within striking distance of hearing the Megillah, nighttime and daytime. Nighttime, and then have a meal. You can have peanut butter and jelly. Just say, hey, this is for Purim. Exchange food with a friend. Could be an apple and a banana or a raisin, whatever. But we're fulfilling this idea of showing the happiness and sharing the joy and giving to 2 poor people. If you need a link, I'll get you a link, and it's a mitzvah. Have a wonderful Purim.
Thank you so much.